John from Ripewave Audio with Marantz's latest AV receiver, the Cinema 30, and this comes in $1,000 more than Denon's closest equivalent model, the AVR-X6800H. And that is a model that we still have in-house here in our rack, and we did a multi-part series so far, and with the Cinema 30 coming into this, we're going to kind of merge these in too and ultimately give you a comparison between the Denon model and the Marantz model. And of course, we still have our Marantz Cinema 50 in our rack and give some comparisons on that as well. Here we have the comparison between models in the Marantz portfolio from the current generation as well as the previous generation. And this Marantz Cinema 30 is taking the place of the SR-8015. Now, since our last video on the Ripewave Audio channel of the similar content, we have seen on the Marantz website the SR-8015 go into archive status, meaning that it's not available for sale anymore from Marantz, but you might still be able to get it from certain retailers. The last price on the 8015 was $2,500, which is a big deal because it was originally just under $3,800, and with the Cinema 30 coming in at $4,500, it's very close in feature sets. And we'll point out what those differences are in this video. The Cinema 30 falls just below the AV10 from Marantz's current line, but there's a huge difference between the $7,000 processor and this receiver that has 11 channels of amplification at 140 watts into 2 channels, or 98 watts with 5 channels, driven using the 70% rule from Denon and Marantz. The 8805A is still available and it fits somewhere in between, but again, it's a processor separate. And the 7706, also a processor, just below the Cinema 30 in price, but the Cinema 40, which we brought into reviews with Ripewave Audio last year, is the next model down, which is $1,000 less than the Cinema 30, and the Cinema 50, yet again, another $1,000 less at $2,500. So if you can get that SR-8015, you're getting at the same price as the Cinema 50. We look at the same comparison chart with the Denon models. As said before, the 6800H is most closely aligned with this. The X8500HA really doesn't have a Marantz equivalent, and neither does the AVR-A1H, but the AV10 is probably the closest thing. And of course, it goes down from there, the 4800 and the 3800 matching up with the Cinema 40 and 50 respectively. And let's take a look at the Cinema 30, which has the same look and cosmetics as all the latest releases from Marantz, including the Cinema 50 that we have in our rack here. The Cinema 30 has these LED lights that illuminate the side panels, and that's something that came in with the Cinema 40, but we don't see on the Cinema 50. You open up the door on these units, and it exposes another LCD screen, which gives you a lot more information in that porthole, which is criticized by many, and something that the Cinema 50 model lacks, that extra display. This is also available in silver, and that's, you can see, as we got ours as silver because we were curious how that compared right next to each other, and the Cinema 50 in black, the Cinema 30 in silver. The back of this unit is got a copper color. The copper color is just not color, it's a plating which brings extra shielding to this model. When we compare it against older generation of products, you see that they drop some things. You no longer have HDMI in the front. You no longer have extra audio video connections on the front of the unit, and some of the buttons like the movie music mode buttons have been removed. This is something you can see through the line, and if you look on the back of these older units, you'll see more composite and component connections, but you don't see as many subwoofer because they added 2 additional subwoofers for a total of 4 independent controllable subwoofer outputs on these newer models, starting with the Cinema 50, and the Cinema 30 is no exception. Comparing against the Denon, and you can see up here with me as well, has the buttons are exposed, but its display is always available with either the door open or close, and has more of a traditional look. The back of the unit is pretty much the same except for that copper plating that the Marantz has and the Denon doesn't. You'll see no difference really in cosmetics with the Cinema 40 or with the Cinema 50, just the difference in I/O count, in some cases a little taller. The AV10 again has that same look, so paying $7,000 doesn't give you something that's cosmetically superior than what you get with the Cinema 30, 40, or 50. But it does give you some balanced I/O with this, and it gives you everything with a pre-out that is balanced. Taking the hood off, you can see with the Cinema 30, we're now with a toroidal power supply as we had with the 8015, but the 6800 from Denon does not. It's still an E-core transformer. So a big difference between Denon and Marantz is the type of transformer. They've had to make it deeper to account for the changes in the power supply. And looking at it for the whole lineup, and again, you can see the Denon is more closely associated with the 40 and the 50 as far as what it looks like inside. One of the key reasons to move from a Cinema 40 to a Cinema 30 is to get those 2 extra channels of processing so you can have front wides and DTS:X Pro support. So this allows for a 7.4.6 configuration or a 9.4.4. Either 3 rows of heights without front wides or 2 rows of heights with front wides. And that's the choice that you make. And this is the same layout that the 6800 provides for. These are supporting all the formats now with that DTS:X Pro edition, Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, and Aural 3D. And this is Aural 3D 13.1. This is what you get on these upper models. When you go to the Cinema 40 or 50, it's 11.1 Aural 3D. So you don't go to the full 13.1, and they're doing this by giving you that center height speaker, the top surround simultaneously, the 7 channels at ear level, plus the 2 front heights and the 2 rear heights, and that's where you get the 13.1. All have IMAX Enhance, Dolby Vision. They all optionally have Direct Live and bass control, but those are paid options versus the Odyssey, which is built in. None of them have THX support. The DACs on these we understand to be ESS 9017S 8-channel DAC, so they have a few of these to give you the full channel count, and that results in a 104 dB signal-to-noise ratio at 0.004%, and also giving you DSD support at a DSD 128 and PCM at 24192. The I/O count is giving you 6 analog inputs, which is the highest count that Marantz supports, and it's giving you at least a token amount of composite and component video, but not as much as prior generations, and that moving magnet input. But you're not going to have any balance connections on the Cinema 30 or its equivalent from Denon. And no longer do you have any 7.1 input, so everything's happening through HDMI. With the HDMI, these are all 100% 8K inputs versus the prior generation that only had 1. The outputs are 2 that are 8K, 1 that's 4K for a full total count of 3. These support a lot of the 2.1 feature sets like variable refresh rate and quick frame transport, auto low latency mode, but they do not support QMS quick media switching due to a defect that's coming from the Nuvoton chip, formerly known as Panasonic chips, that is not able to account for this, and it's probably something that's not going to be fixable. They all have the Ethernet and wireless support, including bidirectional support for Bluetooth transmit and receive. All the latest generation Denon Marantz products check the boxes for voice control, but they have dropped support for JOS. What I like about this model is it has 3 trigger outputs, which is something that even the flagship processor, the AV10, lacks. That only has 2. Streaming, ecosystems, etc. are all supported just like any other Denon Marantz model. Streaming internet service, again, the same as any other Denon Marantz. The remote is very similar to what we have with the Cinema 50, but I do notice some variations. The Cinema 30 is heavier than the other, although they look the same. It has a raised Marantz logo versus this is just silkscreen on the Cinema 50, and you have some extra zone buttons and the removal of the Eco button, no longer on the remote, but it's backlit and you can push the button. What I will call out on the physical aspects, this is heavier than Denon at 42.8 pounds. While both are made in Japan, the Marantz carries a 5-year warranty where the Denon only 3. So what are your thoughts on this new Marantz Cinema 30? That feedback would be appreciated by Ripewave Xpress audience. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, hit the bell notification, and as always, keep evolving your audio experience.